NBA players' toughest matchup. Let's start off, Steph Curry. Steph Curry ended up mentioning a bunch of different players that gave him a lot of trouble, mentioning Drew Holiday, Avery Bradley, Tony Allen. He be saying like stuff like they be in the right place at the right time and they're physical. They study his game and know his moves. I could definitely see this too. And obviously this doesn't mean he's scared or he thinks that they're actually going to stop him. He's still probably going to go for 40, but he knows he's going to have to work that much harder on those given nights, or smarter and just move more strategically on the court. He also mentions Pat Beverly, not just because of his defense, obviously because of his antics too, which makes sense because not only is he a good defender, but he talks to try and get you off your game. And Patrick Beverly, as we see him, bro, like he likes to get at people's egos. And he also mentioned his brother being one of the tough ones. I didn't really know if he was being serious at first. And then after he mentioned that he actually had a game against him, that he was just annoying as hell, getting in the passing lanes, swiping the ball. And he also mentions he just has the look that he knows what you're about to do. That's definitely like a brother thing for sure. Next up, we got Shaq. Shaq by far says his toughest matchup that he ever had to go up against was Hakeem Olajuwon. He says that it was the only guy that he couldn't intimidate or figure out. And then Shaq got asked, why couldn't you break him? Shaq responded by saying, I couldn't get into his head. He said, I remember I gave him an elbow one time, and he just laughed and he said, nice elbow, brother. And then later on just ended up just scoring on him. Even when Shaq dunked on him, he just shrugged it off. And he went back on the other end of the court and scored on him like nothing happened. And obviously he had really good moves too. But Shaq most of the time is able to get into the heads of his opponents. And it was real hard for him to do that with Hakeem. And plus the fact that he's already skilled as hell, dream shakes and all. That's tough. Up next, we got Kobe. Kobe has a bunch of different players that he says, gave him a little bit of a tough time. One of them being Allen Iverson. Next up, Stephon Marbury, Gilbert Arenas, Melo, Durant. The toughest one of them all was Tracy McGrady. Tracy McGrady was 6'9". He had the skills, the athleticism. Kobe just says that he was really tough to figure out. And T-Mac definitely brought that competitive spirit out of Kobe too. Because as soon as he gets his ankles broken, he goes down back on the court, he dunks it. He took that shit personally. Hits the backboard type shit. And this is why I also think that this is his toughest matchup, or why he says this is his toughest matchup. Because he challenged him mentally. It's always good to have somebody that can challenge you mentally so that you can grow, you feel? Next up, we got Paul George. Paul George says his toughest matchup by far was Carmelo Anthony. He was physical. He was literally giving it to him in every single way that you could. Pause. With deep threes, mid-ranges, post-game. And he was really good at creating contact in the paint and being physical. Next up, we got Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson mentions that his toughest matchups were Steve Nash and Stephon Marbury. He just says that Steve Nash was ahead because he could do it all. He just knew how to get it done, which I don't really know what he means by that. But I think it just means that he just knows basketball and just knows the ins and outs and how to do certain things that most people don't really understand. Like that little stuff that you can't really teach, Next up, we got Magic Johnson. Johnson mentions Nate McMillan, Joe Dumars, MJ, and Scotty as some of his toughest matchups that he had to go through. Out of all of them, though, he says that Dennis Johnson was the toughest matchup because he was big frame and was strong like him. Next up, we got KG. KG mentions that Rasheed Wallace and Tim Duncan were the ones that were the hardest for him to guard, or not his hardest matchups. He mentions when he be guarding guards, he kind of gives them a little bit of space so he can be more lenient with them. Because he knows his arms are long enough for him to be able to recover. If they do like a step back or something like that. Even with some of the bigs, he was able to kind of be lenient with them too. They didn't really know how to use their abilities. Rasheed knew how to use his length. Man, pause. I'm putting a no homo over all this. He mentions that it was hard for him to block a shot because he was able to use his length to his advantage and his energy. Next up, we got MJ. MJ mentions that his toughest matchup was Joe Dumars. And Joe Dumars mentioned that he never really talked trash to Michael Jordan. They just kind of came on there and they kind of just figured each other out on the court. But there was definitely a mutual respect between the two of them. Next up, we got Gary Payton. Gary Payton mentions that his toughest matchup was John Stockton. Most of the games that Gary Payton would be going to, he'd be thinking that he's gonna be psyching people out, but John Stockton wouldn't even talk to him or look at him. John Stockton was just hella efficient and was just a pure point guard that just got it done to the point where it was annoying to Gary Payton. And here we got Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard mentions that his toughest matchup was Patrick Beverly. This Patrick Beverly makes everything hard. He's trying to take you out of who you are. He says he doesn't really get any technical fouls, but when he plays Pat Bev, they're both getting double technicals and shit. So those were the toughest matchups for some of the NBA players. So leave a like, comment if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe. And I'll catch y'all niggas later, man.